jeez. Okay, anyway. That's it. That's all I'm giving you. So, most interesting for us was the experience of Tong Lingshu, who had been a student at the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union. He grew up and went to middle school under the Kuomintang, but because he was 12 years younger than his cousin Shibai and went to Tsinghua after the liberation of China in 1949, he didn't consider himself an old-style intellectual like his cousin, but one of the first generation of new revolutionary intellectuals being raised by the Communist Party. He became a communist in 1952 and went off to the Soviet Union to study to become a red engineer without really understanding that he had put his vocation before politics. I felt that red engineers are better than white engineers, but it was the engineer part that was still most important. In the Soviet Union, he found the whole university very career-oriented, and the study of architecture as divorced from practice as it had been in China under the old Western system. If one chose for a thesis a practical problem facing China's construction, there was no way for the Soviet teachers to handle it. So Tong went to the library, read other men's theses, and wrote something very abstract, which won him immediate recognition as an architect of promise. Stempeld. No. It's really funny that he goes to engineering school, but then he actually just does architecture instead, which isn't the same as engineering. And he's completely right that architecture as a discipline is completely divorced from practice, generally speaking. There are some architects who are not like that, but they're extraordinarily rare. In general, architecture these days is the architects don't know anything about the actual engineering that would be required to create the thing that they want to exist, and so they end up often creating things that can't exist or would be significantly too costly to make if you wanted them to exist. And so the engineers always have to talk to the architects and tell them that no, we really just can't do that, sorry, that's physically impossible, etc. Anyway. On leaving the Soviet university, he was given 3 gifts, which summed up the Russian approach to academic life. The first was a leather briefcase to keep his PhD thesis in. The second was a wooden box with a hand-painted picture of the Kremlin on it to keep his awards and medals in. And the third was a leather wallet, also embossed with the picture of the Kremlin, the purpose of which could hardly be in doubt. Tong did not think through the meaning of those gifts, but when the Cultural Revolution raised the issue of the 2 roads, he realized that the gifts in no way conflicted with his own inner goals. They summed up the essence of bourgeois careerism. Tong returned from the Soviet Union at the time of the Great Leap Forward and was quite critical of the mass movement for production that was involving the students and staff at the university at that time. He was criticized as a right opportunist, but received no education concerning the two-line struggle. Footnote: two-line struggle, or struggle between 2 lines, refers to struggles in society over basic issues of policy and program. Which reflect basic differences between the main classes contending for power. In a period of socialist revolution, the contending classes are the working class and the capitalist class, or bourgeoisie, and the struggle between them is reflected in every sphere. Behind the phrase lies the understanding that there is never simply an objectively best way to do things, but that members of different classes do things differently because they have different class goals. Correct. As a result, he became despondent and turned his attention even more exclusively towards his vocation. Since he had made political mistakes, he decided to be a vocational communist and leave politics to others. Oh god, he's an American. Wait. Obviously, with an outlook like this, he could hardly play a positive role in transforming Tsinghua into a socialist university. In spite of his Communist Party membership, he, like his cousin, became a bourgeois academic authority. Can we talk about the sheer number of people who, for some reason, legitimately believe that if you are a member of a communist party somewhere, that automatically makes you like an actual communist, like ideologically and practically speaking, even though this man clearly isn't. Right? And many other people obviously aren't either. Passive praxis. It's more like no praxis. No praxis, and just because you are a member of a communist party doesn't magically actually make you a communist. Politically speaking. There are lots of parties that call themselves communist that aren't. There are many parties that are communist, but some of the members aren't communists. This can happen to anyone, like, to any party. Like, it's just how it is. And people who deny that somebody could maybe not be communists while they're also in a communist party is just ridiculous. Anyway. But what of the administrators of Tsinghua, those experienced communists who are ostensibly in charge of higher education and had undertaken the task of transforming it along socialist lines? Were they really powerless to deal with the Tongs and Qians in the long struggle over the educational line that took place during the 50s and 60s? We talked for a long time, with Liu being Vice Secretary of the Tsinghua University Party Committee from 1956 to 1966, and again from 1970 until now. He is a mild-mannered, soft-spoken man of medium height and middle age, who joined the Chinese Revolution back in 1938, after running away from a Henan middle school and the landlord home into which his father had been adopted, when Liu's starving peasant grandparents could no longer feed their son. In 1956, Liu Bing must have seemed exactly the right man for the Tsinghua campus. He had actually been trained at Resistance University in Yunnan when it was directed by Lin Biao and personally supervised by Mao. Afterward, he had become a cadre of the New Democratic Youth League at the county level, and later a Central Committee member representing the Communist Youth League when it formed in 1949. He had rich experience in rural work, in popular education, and in mass mobilization. At Tsinghua, he moved into a strategic position. Jiang Nanxiang, even though he was nominally president of the university and secretary of the party committee, spent little time on the campus. Liu Bing, as vice secretary, was actually in charge of day-to-day work, and was in a position to refashion the whole Tsinghua system if he really made that his goal. In fact, Liu Bing did nothing of the sort. When I got here, Liu Bing said, Liu Shaqi and Liu Dingyi were saying, what we had before were training classes. Now we need regular universities. I fell for it. Jiang Nanxiang said, that old resistance university method won't work. This is something new and different. New and different. It's really funny how it's not. It's funny how it's literally the opposite. Something new and different. You know, exactly like an American university. Here we must produce scientists. A little Marxist-Leninist theory, a little study of society, a little military training won't solve the problem. Oh my god. It's so blatant. Oh my god. Ah, boy. Oh boy. By the way, let's see here. He was in the New Democratic Youth League. Alright, so the New Democratic Youth League was the youth organization led by the Communist Party in the period of the New Democratic Revolution that ended with nationwide victory in 1949. The Socialist Revolution began in 1949, and the New Democratic Youth League was reorganized as the Communist Youth League. Yeah, okay. Do I really need to explain something so basic? Maybe I do. There were two revolutions in China. There was first the New Democratic Revolution, which created the Republic of China. Okay, this was the overthrow of the old feudal imperial system. Okay, the second revolution was the communist revolution. Okay, that happened later, slightly later. During the New Democratic Revolution, Mao himself actually was an anarchist, for a brief period at least, for those who who don't know. Anyway, when we were at Resistance University, Mao Zedong told us that the center of our work should be changing the thinking of our students. That was like in the 20s, though. It was really early on. He became a communist shortly after that. Anyway, what's really funny is that at some point he considered becoming a policeman, but then didn't. And he became an anarchist instead, which is like the opposite of a policeman. What's up, Wolfgang? When we were at Resistance University, Mao Zedong told us that the center of our work should be changing the thinking of our students. Isn't that kind of the point of teaching? Isn't that how it works? If the thinking of the students was correct already, wouldn't there be no need for the teaching? We should strive for 3 things. 1, a staunch political orientation. 2, flexible strategy and tactics. And 3, a good working style. This is what conservatives think universities are about in America. They think this is what they think liberal universities are doing. First and foremost, they indoctrinate our children into communism. In a different country. Wow. Mexico? Canada? Those are the closest countries to America, so... Cuba? Cuba's also close to America. Bahamas? Jamaica? Maybe it's not a close country. Maybe you're in Japan. Maybe you're in China. Maybe you're in Malaysia. Maybe you're in Kazakhstan. Maybe you're in Zimbabwe. I don't know. Chile? It doesn't. France. Wow. Ew, no. Je déteste la France. Ouais, c'est un pays terrible. France, that's nice though, that's nice. Oh boy. Scotland would be better, or Ireland. Those are the only, well, okay, Wales is kind of okay. Scotland and Ireland are the only 2 cool European countries. In my humble opinion. Shave. Good luck shaving your legs, that is not easy. I don't even bother doing that. I'm a butch, so it doesn't matter, but like... That's a pain, yeah. Good luck. Have fun. Thanks for stopping by. Alright, let's see here. So, but when I came here to Tsinghua University, everyone said the task was just the opposite. We weren't here to change people's outlook, but to teach knowledge, science. Enlightenment thinking. Ugh. I like how they never interrogate these categories that they've built. They never interrogate their own ontology here. Knowledge, science, these just mean something. Pure ideologies, they apparently mean something. But they're never going to explain what, or interrogate why they think something falls into those categories and other things somehow don't. This is why we need to teach everyone philosophy. Okay, maybe that's a little bit far. I don't know. Here we put technique above all, expertise above all, and organize mountain climbing teams to scale the peaks of science. What if we actually organized mountain climbing teams to scale peaks for real? Like actual mountains? I personally think that maybe the mountain climbers should climb mountains and the scientists could do the science. Maybe you could have scientists that are also mountain climbers. Okay, I mean, I've climbed mountains, and I'm a scientist in a way. I literally have an engineering degree, so I think that counts, among other things. But should we specifically be seeking out mountain climbing teams to do the science instead of the people who are already trained as scientists? I know. In case any of you are unable to tell, I'm joking. I'm joking that I can't tell. So I thought, maybe this Polytechnical Unit School is different from Resistance University, where the main subjects were politics and social theory. Those should be the main subjects all the time. Am I a freak? So I too put technique in command. No, we had to put politics in command. Technique in command. That's how you get tech bros, y'all. We did it because we can. Don't worry about the million people that died because of it. As to teaching methods, Mao Zedong advocated the method of enlightenment as opposed to the stuffed duck method. But we had regulations here that tied the students hand and foot. In Yunnan, the classes had been lively. We had had debates, discussions. I thought, maybe that is suitable for a training class, but here, where there is so much science to learn, perhaps we must cram the facts in. So I fell for the stuffed duck method. Chairman Mao, I said all along, cut the school years shorter. This is one of the reasons why some people slander Mao as anti-intellectual, even though he's the opposite of that. They have no critical thinking skills whatsoever. That's why. They hear something like this and think that they somehow manage to interpret this as Mao being anti-intellectual, even though he's actually advocating for an increased quality of education. If you had just like read the context of that. At Resistance University, the time was short. At first, 3 months, later a year, then the graduates went down to work. Of course, technical courses needed more time than the social sciences, but they didn't need all the time we argued for. What's up, ATS? Lu Dingyi suggested 10 years, but we ended up with 2 years in senior middle school, 6 years in college, and 3 years in graduate courses, making it 11 altogether. That was doing Lu Dingyi one better. That is how we creatively carried out Lu Dingyi's instructions and applied them to Tsinghua. The argument was that too little time would keep the standards of the graduates down, so we added rather than subtracted. I thought, I have no experience, I know nothing of technical things. Probably more time really is needed. Have you tried actually going out to like work on the technical thing in real life? So that, you know, hands-on learning is the only actual best. At a certain point, that's the only way to proceed. So I worked together with the others to carry out this 11-year system. 11 years. Basically locked away, looking over books, never doing anything in the real world. But sure, that's definitely superior to what Mao advocated for. Mao's just anti-intellectual for saying that that's silly. This is what a home lab is for. Hands-on learning, yeah. Oh boy. But the majority were not satisfied with it. They came in as young people and they went out with graybeards. The staff and the older professors at Tsinghua never tired of telling Liu Bing that he was in no position to lead them. In 1957, this became a campus-wide issue. As Liu Bing put it, in 1957, the rightists jumped out and said, "You're only a clod, a country bumpkin." Who says country bumpkin? What accent works for this? You are only a clod, a country bumpkin. You don't have any technical knowledge at all. I don't know. Under this kind of pressure, I was convinced that I was indeed a country bumpkin, that I knew nothing of education, and since I don't know, I had better listen to others, and especially to Jiang Nanxiang. Thus, I got pushed around. I had no idea that this was class struggle. So anyway, footnote about the rightists here. In 1957, people who opposed socialist construction and preferred to build a bourgeois society were labeled rightists. Among them were intellectuals, students, former Kuomintang officials, and former independent businessmen, as well as communists sympathetic to them. But why did the rightists make you their target? I asked. They attacked me because I was vice secretary of the Communist Party Committee, even though I had no academic standing. Jiang Nanxiang was a graduate of Tsinghua. He graduated before the anti-Japanese war. Now the slogan was, Wai Hang can't lead Nei Hang, okay? Those outside the trade can't lead those inside. Jiang Nanxiang was obviously an insider while I was an outsider. I hadn't graduated from college. I hadn't even graduated from middle school, and I was a country bumpkin to boot. I was doubly an outsider, an old communist transferred from mass work. How could a middle school student lead professors? They made that clear at the very beginning of my work here. The day after I arrived, I gave a lecture on the communist leadership, but before I got through, a whole pile of notes came up from the audience. The gist was, "Stop all that nonsense. We've heard it all before." Then, when the rightists went on to the offensive in 1957, they attacked me personally and said, "Pumpkin, get out!" In the countryside, the peasants never drove me away. When I worked in a factory and led the fight against economism and the workers welcomed me. I was always treated as a comrade, but here they wanted to drive me away. I was surprised at their attitude. You shouldn't have been, but okay. Typical academic elitists. When people complain about academic leftists, this is the people they're talking about mostly. You didn't study for 57 years, you didn't read nothing but theory and never do any actual practice. How dare you? You don't have any right to speak here. How could you possibly be in charge of us? Yeah. I was always treated as a comrade. God. Oh boy. I was surprised at their attitude. I should have drawn some conclusions, but I didn't. Yeah, the conclusions would be that, guess what? Who could have guessed that the class background of the people who are like that tends to be bourgeois? Who could have fucking guessed? Along came victory in the movement. We pulled out 200 to 300 rightist students and a similar number among the faculty. So I thought all the rightists had been pulled out of the class and the class struggle had been resolved. I accepted the theory of the dying out of class struggle. Oh boy, that's a big mistake. Big mistake. Class struggle was not resolved. Class struggle did not die out. It doesn't. It doesn't until classes are eliminated. Until you have actual communism reached. During the period of transition between capitalism and communism, how can class struggle just disappear immediately like that? It doesn't. You can't just kick out the rightists and think that class struggle is over. They're still there, you know. They still have bourgeois proclivities. They're still out there being bourgeois. Just because the communists took over doesn't mean that it's magically communist yet. The goal is to reach communism, but that takes a long fucking time now, doesn't it? And none of what I'm saying even contradicts standard Marxist-Leninist theory. That's the worst part. This is so obvious. It'll wither away just like it's on, just disappear like magic. Yeah. Well, in this case, it's not withering away on its own. They're doing something. They're kicking out all the people that they've decided are rightists from the university. Even if they're wrong, even if it wasn't actually all the rightists, and even if kicking them out isn't the actual solution. But they did it. They did something. COVID will just wither away. But I mean, Biden wants to convince us all that the pandemic is over. It's not a thing anymore. Don't worry about it. The emergency is over. It's not a problem. Go out, interact with as many people as you want again. Never wear a mask. You don't need it. And they wonder why COVID infections are rising again. Hold on. Let me find my clip for this. Oh, of course you have a clip for this. Chairman Fred. I don't know who Chairman Fred is. Chairman Fred. Like Fred, like the YouTuber? Like that guy? I remember him. In year 4 of the Rona. But yeah, Biden is, it's not the greatest dude. Just gonna put that out there. Oh fuck! Now the anarcho-Bidenists are gonna come kill me for that. Fred Hampton. Oh, no. See, he's actually cool. Okay, I got it. A clip of Fred Hampton. That's always good. Oh. Oh wait. All right, let's see here. So what's going on? So this guy convinced himself that class struggle just magically disappeared by kicking out the rightists, as if they aren't still existing, just somewhere else now, as if the classes don't exist anymore, as if you just magically made that all the class antagonism and class struggle disappear because you said it did. If we all just believe in communism hard enough, it will magically happen. Once we had defeated the rightists, Mao Zedong set out the thesis that our education should serve proletarian politics. It should. There's one where he talks about the dangers of doing the wrong action to avoid taking no action. In this case, labeling people rightists and expelling them. Yeah, okay, nice. Yeah, like, so in this case, it's just like, okay, so you have a bunch of people that are stuck in, you know, old bourgeois ways of thinking, okay? If the solution is just kick them out, it's, how, are they really so dangerous that kicking them out is the only solution here? Really? Like, were they trying to kill you? Well, later they would, actually. We'll get to that part. That's later in the book. That will actually happen, kind of. Right, I forgot this is the Cultural Revolution, so that actually happened. Never mind. They were. But they're talking about earlier, I think. I don't know exactly when they're talking about that. But yeah, anyway. So once we had defeated the rightists, supposedly, Mao Zedong set out the thesis that our education should serve proletarian politics and be combined with productive labor. This is like, it's funny how many people will like, oh my god, no, this sounds horrible. And then you think about it and it's like, okay, so like, teaching people to be like socially conscious and like not assholes and like actually care about making the world a better place. This is apparently bad. And also, oh my god, combining education with productive labor. What does that actually mean? It means stuff like internships and apprenticeships and like actually going out and like learning how to do the thing that your degree or whatever your education is ostensibly supposed to be about. Oh no, the horror. But okay, you know. He also raised the ideas of communes in the countryside and of the Great Leap Forward. She, later, do we have to pull out the speech again? The 1959 Lucian Conference speech about, communization and the Great Leap Forward, and about Mao's regrets of those things happening way too quickly, causing millions of deaths. Is he gonna Are we gonna? I'm just saying. I was very happy. I saw all these new developments. I saw our students going to Henan to make iron and steel. Yeah. So Mao regretted ordering so much steel. In case you're wondering. I know that I bring this speech up multiple times, but we just have to. We just have to. I'm not going to read the whole speech. We've done that before. If we scroll down to the bottom, okay. Okay, maybe not that far. This is what he says. I have committed 2 crimes, and one of which is calling for 10.7 million tons of steel and the mass smelting of steel. If you agreed with this, you should share some of the blame. He's not wrong. Let me, but since I was the inventor of burial puppets, which I'm not going to explain, I could, but I'm not going to, I cannot pass on the blame. The main responsibility is mine. He explains it earlier in the thing, maybe. Anyway, it's a reference to a Chinese folk story. Okay, anyway. As for the People's Communes, the whole world opposed them. The Soviet Union opposed them. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about the steel thing and why he's totally correct that the people who agreed with him on that should also share the blame. So basically, this is something that happened a lot in the Communist Party of China during this period, was there were always people who would agree with Mao either with everything he said or only with the things that he wanted that wouldn't turn out well. The first group, of course, would be just people who were idolizing Mao or whatever, which he didn't like. And the second group of people were people who actually opposed Mao and wanted him to fail. So they supported all of the bad things all the bad ideas that he had, and never supported any of the good ideas that he had. This happened quite frequently. So people would end up undermining the revolution, you could say, I guess, by being like, that 10.7 million tons of steel, that sounds like a lot. Do we really need to do that? Wait, don't we need to feed people? Yeah, we gotta feed people, but look, if we just let Mao do this, then a bunch of people will die and people will get really angry at him. So let's just let him do it. Gosh. There were some of those in there. I don't know how many, but there were some of those in there. That's true. It's well known. Yeah, if you want more details about that, he's talking about why this all happens, who was responsible for the mass idea, or for the idea of the mass smelting of steel. Was it Ko Xingxi or me? I say it was me. He talked with Ko Xingxi and spoke of 6 million tons. Afterwards, I sought out people to talk about it. Someone else also said it was possible. In June, I talked about 10.7 million tons. Then we went ahead and did it. Which was a bad idea. You timestamped the Fred Hampton clip. Thank you. I'll pull that up in just a second. Oh, I see. This is all in Wade Giles, which I hate so much. Oh my god. Oh, that's so confusing. There's a reference to Joan Lyon here, and it's like spelled with a CH at the beginning. Like, oh my god. Oh god, that's so confusing. Oh boy. Let's see here. This speech is goldmine, honestly. Like, this is such a great speech. If you're interested, for learning about this stuff, if you're interested in it, yeah. Whether or not you think the speech is like a good speech rhetorically is a different question, but as far as for learning about this this period, I think this speech is quite helpful. I like this. Now about the problem of canteens. Canteens are a good thing. Yeah, and should not be criticized too severely. I'm in favor of their active and successful development on the basis of voluntary membership. Grain should go to individual households, and any savings should be retained by individuals. Blah, 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 blah. So the canteens they were basically government-run, like, subsidized food, essentially. You usually only paid, like, the cost of, so either you would pay the cost of the material, the cost of the labor. I think it was just the cost of preparation. The cost of labor is all you would pay, generally. And they also had grain quotas, just to give people free grain, basically, a certain amount. Yeah, anyway. It was essentially just government subsidized food program, and there's nothing wrong with that, frankly. So he's right that was good. But yeah. Anyway, there's so much to talk about with the speech, but of course we can't diverge just to read a speech that we've already read on stream before. But yeah, anyway, so all of the steel, yeah, he was right that was a mistake. That was a bit much. It was too much steel, y'all. Too much steel, my man. All right, here's Hampton. Whoops, here's Fred Hampton. Let's see here.
Now, briefly, how would you sum up what the Weatherman SDS is trying to do and what you think of what they're trying to do?
I'd say that basically they believe that white people need to learn how to struggle. That they believe that these white workers need to learn how to struggle through confrontations. I'd have to say that basically I believe that this is incorrect. I believe that white workers have been struggling. They're some of the most violent people in the world. I believe that what they need a redirection in their ideology and in their politics. They need to know who to struggle against. The workers need to start to begin to learn that their job is to struggle against the bosses. And until they do this, then struggle is incorrect. It's like no struggle at all. We say that if you don't struggle correctly, you shouldn't struggle. But you should struggle. We said dare to struggle and you dare to win, dare not to struggle, and you don't deserve to win. But we have to struggle properly.
What about the...
All right. Yeah, so... Yeah, it's what Jane said. Yeah, so he's talking about the Weather Underground, aka the Weathermen, who were basically a pretty much all-white group that operated mainly in Chicago, though maybe also in some other places. And they did a lot of, well, like you said, violent struggle, if you want to put it that way. Trying to relate it to our situation. Yeah, this is like the general principle that he's talking about, though, where you know, incorrect struggle is basically the same as no struggle at all, or perhaps even worse, right? He's not wrong. Like if you look at the well, it's not just engineers that they're talking about, by the way. It's like people who were taught like very traditional Western ways of like how academia should be run, and like teaching styles and such. That's who we're talking about, not just engineers. But they need an entire ideological toolbox. Yeah. So what's interesting is that, so when I was doing my engineering degree, my favorite professor, who is unfortunately departed very shortly after I graduated, actually. But anyway, he would always do this at the beginning of most classes, usually. Like at the beginning of a semester in a class, he would very often, especially the introductory classes, ask students, what's the most important thing about being an engineer? Like, what's the most important quality that an engineer should have, rather, right? So, all right, class, you, chat, what's the most important quality of an engineer? Let's see if you can get the answer correct, at least according to him. And I agree with him, so also according to me. It looks like Jane's already on the mark here. It looks like both of you. I've already got the right idea. I'm apparently building a weird toolbox. It's like, well, anyway, the answer that he would give is ethics. Okay, that's the most important quality of an engineer. And yeah, like what Jane said, you yeah, it's not just about the technology. It's not. The most important thing is using it correctly, right? And like, so like he had actually worked like in the past designing special coatings for stealth aircraft, right? That was like one of the things he had done. So that was one of those sorts of things that comes up when we talk about the ethics, you know. And it's like, yeah, try not to do military stuff, y'all, please. It was always funny hearing what some of the students' answers were, though. Like people were like, "Oh, you would be good at math." It's like the computer can do the math for you, actually. They were trying to figure out if they could instead of if they should. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but that is a major. The thing about people like in the engineering world coming out of college, looking for their first job, whatever, what happens is a whole huge number of people, you'll see people constantly complaining about this, that they don't want to go work for Raytheon or whatever to design the latest bomb to murder people with. But damn, they pay well, right? They try to pay you enough that you can kind of ignore, or at least not care as much about the ethical concerns there. Exactly, a premium for your conscience. Yeah, so that's the thing. If you are an up and coming engineer, you're trying to figure out what you want to do, like where do you want to work or whatever. I will say, I don't think you should ever work for an aerospace company or anyone who would potentially be involved in the military industrial complex in that way. But the problem is, it's very difficult to get a job that isn't involved in that, in engineering. At least, and the ones that aren't are not going to be paid as well. And so many people just give in. Other people, like me, just don't end up going into engineering at all. Two uncles are senior engineers in engineer management in Lockheed Martin. Oh my god. Yeah. Yep. Offshore oil rig. The oil rigs pay well. Oil stuff usually pays well in general. That's another one where it's like, yeah, we know we're like that this is all absolutely horrible for the environment, and it's also very dangerous for the people working in the field, like on an oil rig or out, doing the fracking or whatever it is. Those are not exactly safe occupations, generally speaking, and so there is a bit of extra money involved just because of that as well. All right. So yeah, so anyway, this guy's talking about the steel making. He's saying he has a more positive view of the steel making and the Great Leap Forward, though, even though Mao himself would have said and did say that was the extent of that was a great mistake, and gave himself the blame, and the other people in the party who went along with his bad ideas gave them some of the blame too, which he's not wrong. Like, you can't just say, I was just following orders, or like, oh, well, it wasn't really necessarily orders. That's the problem. It's orders once the parties decided to do it, but before the parties decided to do it, you have people just agreeing with Mao because he's Mao, and that's a problem, right? He didn't like that either. The problem is that he never managed to really do much about this. He talked about it, he complained about it, but he didn't end up managing to do stuff about it, even though he tried a little bit. He just didn't succeed, frankly. Like, by the time he really tried to do anything about it, it was too late, unfortunately. In my opinion. Oh, boy. Not having algebra at 8 a.m. as a 15-year-old was a world of difference. Yeah. 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 Oh my god. 8 a.m. Wow, that's pretty late for high school classes, isn't it, these days? They usually have kids start at like 7 something. I feel like I've never started at 8 a.m. anymore. It would always be earlier. I had to like get up at like 5 a.m. to catch the bus at like 6 something. 14. Yeah. When did I do algebra? Middle school? Ish? Yeah. Yeah, not even high school. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I did calculus in high school. I mean, well, let me think about it. When did I do that? I did calculus. I started calculus halfway through high school. That's what I did. I see. Graduated in 04. Yeah, you're like 10 years older than me or something. Oh my gosh. I feel so young, thank you. Well, the algebra teacher let me sleep and use a graphing calculator and no homework. Nice. Nice. Yeah, when I did, one thing that happened to me, this was a problem. I did calculus 1 and 2 in high school, my junior year, and then calculus 2 over the summer before senior year, at the local community college. Okay. And then I didn't have any math classes senior year because there was nothing at the high school, of course, that was higher level than Calc 2, a college level class, right? And so I had no math for a year, and then I went into college and I had to do Calc 3. I'll give you a hint. I had to retake Calc 3 the second semester of college. Had to retake a couple of classes. Yeah, this is one of the things about math. If you don't practice it, you lose the skills very quickly, unfortunately. Especially the more complicated it is. You really gotta relearn a lot of shit before you can start on something new if you haven't been regularly doing math, like, constantly for a while. Alright, let's see here. So this guy was happy. He was happy with all this stuff, you know. He saw this as good ideas, good things, you know, happening with the Great Leap Forward and the various mass movements and whatnot. I wonder if he'll eventually change his opinion on that. We'll see. He's about to get into the 60s, so he might change his opinion in just a second. Let's see here. So he was very happy. I saw all these new developments. I saw our students going to Hinton to make iron and steel. I saw the mass movements, and I was happy. Mass movements were something that I was familiar with. I played a central role. I became the director of steelmaking at Tsinghua. It was not the same as messing around in laboratories. Boy. Then in 1960, we had a drought and flood. The Soviet Union pulled out, tore up their agreements. Suddenly, Liu Shaoqi stepped forward and said that our students were doing too much labor, that the quality of education had been lowered, and that it wouldn't do to go on like that. Liu Shaoqi stepping in to make things even worse. We've got the Sino-Soviet split happening. We've got all these droughts and floods and shit happening, and Liu Shaoqi is just like, how can I make things worse? Yeah, you know all these people that are like learning in the field to like do real stuff that will help our nation's infrastructure and like feed people? Fuck that. Send them back to the universities and don't let them do any helpful work at all. Just let them learn about books. Oh. Boy. Boy. So Mao himself would have a slightly so about this particular time period, it's often referred to as the 3 difficult years, the end of the 1950s into 1960, and so he's correct that there were many massive droughts and floods that both destroyed a whole lot of China's crop producing ability at that time. And at the same time, the Sino-Soviet split was ramping up, and the Soviets pulled out all of their technical advisors and such from China, who had been helping them with their expertise to improve the agriculture and industry in China. Additionally, they also started demanding China would repay their war debt from the anti-Japanese and the Korean wars immediately, because they were angry at the Chinese, basically. They weren't on the best terms anymore. So these things happened. Additionally, as he mentioned, at the same time, we had the movement called the Great Leap Forward, which involved a couple of main things. The first was rapid communization of agriculture, and by communization we mean taking smaller farms run by smaller teams of people, the work teams, and putting them together into a larger unit that was referred to as a commune. Okay, and this happened very quickly, too quickly in many cases, and it ended up actually decreasing the efficiency and production of many of these places that communized in terms of their agricultural output. Additionally, at the same time, Mao also, as he said in that speech, ordered 10.7 million tons of steel to be made, which is a lot of steel, and required a huge diversion of workers towards the creation of all of this steel. And a lot of those workers had to come out of agriculture, which also ended up decreasing the agricultural production during a time of many, and then that happened to also end up then there with being all these droughts and floods and the Sino-Soviet split going on. Anyway, there were all of these things that kind of compounded on each other and led to a very large deficit of agricultural production in China at the time, which I'm sure you already know the results of. There were other major factors, other minor factors rather, involved as well in all of these things, of course. But as far as the major factors that contributed to that, it would be, like I said, the natural disasters, the Sino-Soviet split, and the Great Leap Forward, another programs and movements that the party under Mao's direction was attempting to do at the time that ended up being mistakes. Anyway. And that's generally Mao's own view of what the issues were, actually. He would agree with everything I just said, interestingly. In case you're wondering. He was pretty self-critical, actually. People don't think that he was, but he was. Let's see here. All right, let me read this. One of my most formative experiences was in 5th grade, where they took me out of social studies to teach math to these special ed kids. The teachers gave up on them, but I taught them arithmetic just fine. All it took was patience and seeing things from their point of view. So, in college, there was a guy in my engineering classes who is, like me, autistic, but had greater access needs. And so I and some of the other students would regularly meet with him to help him study and whatnot. And yeah, it's like the idea, like, there's a lot of people, like you say, the teachers just give up on them because they don't fit the norm enough, you know, of whatever they're taught, of whatever their teaching style is. It just and then that stuff like that, like people not wanting to be diagnosed, or people not wanting their kid to go into the special ed classes even though they might actually need it. It's not great. But yeah, very often a lot of the problems that these kids have isn't really their fault. Well, it's never their fault, but I mean, like, it's not even often the fault of their neurodivergence in this case. It's the fault of the teachers who don't, and the people who taught the teachers, who don't know or refuse to even try. They don't know how, or refuse to even try to change their teaching style to something that would work for a greater amount of people. And yeah, remedial classes and whatnot are extremely important, and I agree that they should not be stigmatized. Some people need different teaching styles or more help than other people. People are coming from different backgrounds. This is just how it's going to be. People have different abilities. And just giving up on people because they're different from the norm or from the average or whatever by too much is extremely cruel, frankly. And yeah, anyway. So, as he says here, so we got the students back from the countryside, withdrew them from all the 3 revolutionary movements, and set up all sorts of regulations about passing courses. What sort of grade allows you to go on, and what sort of grade means you must drop out. Although I personally liked to see the students going out to work, when the capitalist voters said that this was a mess, I thought they were probably correct. It fit my world outlook at the time, and all this came from inside the Communist Party. See? Well, they're members of the Communist Party, so they couldn't possibly be capitalists trying to undermine the Communist Party. No way. Those couldn't possibly exist inside of our Communist Party. That might be a problem with other people's Communist parties, but not ours. Teaching fundamentals is how you master those fundamentals. That is very, very true. It is extremely hard to really fully understand something, like, without trying to teach it. Like, it just is. One thing that you can do that is similar is rubber duck debugging, but you do it with everything. You do it with everything. You do it as if you're trying to teach somebody, right? You don't even actually need somebody there often, right? Oftentimes. That's basically the principle of rubber duck debugging. You just kind of explain it like you're trying to explain it to somebody else. You can talk out loud or do it in your head. Usually, out loud is more fun. So like, so often when I'm cooking and I want to try something new, I'll explain it out loud to myself to make sure that it makes sense, while I'm doing it. And that greatly decreases the probability of mistakes and also increases your understanding of the actual process. Yeah. But of course, having somebody there is also good because they can ask questions that maybe you don't have a problem with something, but they have a question because they don't understand something, and then you realize, oh, you're right, that is weird. Yeah, let's think about that more, Anyway. So, he never thought that there was class struggle reflected inside our party, so I didn't resist it. I bought it. I didn't recognize that the principal contradiction was between the socialist and the capitalist roads, and that this was especially true after private ownership had been abolished, forcing the struggle to go deeper. As the revolution objectively deepened and moved from base to the superstructure, I moved from the countryside to the city, into the heart of the superstructure, a great university. But subjectively, I didn't recognize what had happened. As far as I was concerned, there was a big gap between the subjective and the objective, and this created the basis for making the mistakes I made. So he mentioned the three revolutionary movements. These are class struggle, which includes almost all significant political struggle. 2, the struggle for production, which includes all productive effort in industry and agriculture. And 3, scientific experiment, which by revealing new objective laws revolutionizes production and social practice. So basically, Yu Shaoqi, under his direction, the university stopped caring about those things and just focused on book learning and grades, right? Actually producing food so that people can eat, working on trying to be able to do that and have food self-sufficiency in our country? Nah, go read books instead. Thanks, Liu Shaoqi. Great job with that. Alright. Chapter 3. A revisionist in spite of himself. Liu Bing's story was a long one, but he had it well in mind. He knew what he wanted to say, so it was hardly necessary to ask any questions. It took him one whole afternoon to review the old Tsinghua system and his own surrender to regular education. It was so hot that I had to keep several layers of heavy paper under my hand to prevent sweat from soaking into my notebook. The heat did not let up all night. You'll just take your shirt off. The next morning, Liu Bing, not the least bit jaded by the unrelenting high temperature and matching humidity, took up what he considered to be the most crucial question of all: Communist Party leadership. This was, of course, linked to the question of which class forces led the party. Education is of utmost importance in contemporary America, particularly from a revolutionary standpoint. You mean like directly after feeding and housing people? Yeah, it's one of the things that is necessary. There are many necessary things, like actual having a support system to be able to physically, support the existence of your revolutionary network of people or whatever, organization, or just in general your community or whatever, right? And then this is one of the necessary things. Education is another necessary thing. You're correct. Yeah. And I would agree that in general, keeping people, alive and fed and housed is the direct priority in most cases, because that is one of the biggest problems we have in America right now, is that people aren't fed and housed and don't have medical care, etc., and doing what we can to work together to give people those things, despite the fact, that the current political and economic system in this country can't provide those things to them normally, is extraordinarily important. Anyway, so as to the question of the Communist Party and the vanguard, Mao Zedong teaches that the party must lead regardless of the situation, no matter what the place. The party must always be in command. But Jiang Nanxiang said that in the university, the party must be a professor's party, a lecturer's party. Once it becomes a party of the professors and lecturers, then it can run the university. What he meant was that when professors are recruited into the Communist Party, then the Communist Party will rule the school, because the professors always rule the school. So, within vanguardism, you do have these sorts of... once you decide that there has to be a vanguard, you always end up with people arguing over who the vanguard should actually be and who they should serve, right? And how they should lead or guide. In the case of Mao, is the term that he would use, usually guide rather than lead, right? Many people would say that the role of communists is, in fact, education and mutual aid, rather than telling people what to do, right? So anyway, here you have Mao basically just having standard vanguardism that the party must lead. Okay, but then this guy, the president of the university at the time, said that, well, we gotta get the professors in charge. We gotta get the intellectuals in charge, if you will, right? He had a sort of, I guess you could say, a technocracy or a meritocracy type of ideal, which of course doesn't actually work and isn't desirable, but so we actively recruited professors into the Communist Party. The slogan was, to recruit Mei Lanfang, a famous Beijing opera star, is better than recruiting 100 banner carriers. Yeah, so they have this sort of intellectual individualism, academic focus here, right? Like one smart or person or so, one famous cultured person is more important than 100 like people to actually go do something, like, which is of course ridiculous, right? And of course they use the phrase banner carriers to try and like derogatorily refer to the masses, and like low-level cadres or whatever, and people who are just regular folks, right? And saying, oh, well, they're just marching around in parades or whatever, they're not doing anything else. When of course that's not the case. That's not what you want them to be doing most of the time, right? So this is a bit of a, this is of course not actually an accurate representation of the real situation here. And it's also the idea that one smart person, one famous person, one really cultured person is more important than 100 like just random everyday folks is ridiculous. It's the random everyday folks who are most important, actually, because it's those people who have the most to gain from building a better world, not the people who are already on top. If I had 100 committed people, things will look different for a lot of people in this town. Yeah. Boy. With this type of thinking, we tried to develop the professors politically and bring them into the party. Hu Jian, a second vice secretary of the party committee and an old comrade of mine, analyzed which individuals looked like the most promising material. Then the central headquarters sent members to talk with them and look them over. We divided the professors and teachers into 3 groups, left, middle, and right. The standard we used for left, good, was whether or not they supported the Communist Party leadership at Tsinghua. What an absurd standard. I can see where this is going. Oh boy, here we go. Whoever had some kind words to say about the communist leaders at the university, we labeled left. Actually, these lefts supported our revisionist line, so what kind of lefts were they? Yep. When we had decided on a few lefts, we informed Jiang Nanxiang. After consultation, we sent some members down to help individual prospects. What kind of help did they give? They had everyone study Liu Shaoqi's book on the self-cultivation of communists. Oops. Yeah, the most capitalist guy in the party. Let's make them read his book. The thing about giving academics and professors political education is they already think they know everything. The good ones don't, but yeah, most of them are very much like that, unfortunately. The good ones are always committed to continuing their learning and learning more no matter what. Like my favorite professor who I mentioned earlier, the one who thinks ethics is the most important thing an engineer can have, was also a student at the university. He was taking classes. He was this old dude. He was taking classes in other fields. He was learning anatomy and shit. And of course he emphasized the importance of continuing to, keep up, even after, you exit school, keeping up with the state of the art in terms of your field at the very least, and looking through the journals for the most, interesting latest technologies that might help you in your work, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can't just do school and then you're done with learning. And then everything else, there's no more learning. You've already learned everything. Now you go do the thing. And you don't learn anything, and you certainly don't talk back to your superiors when they say to do something that's silly. No, no, no. They're used to being the expert in the room. Yeah, there are a lot of professors are a lot like that, unfortunately. That is one of the many, but most common personality types that is heavily cultivated systemically within the academic system in this country, at the very least, and in many other places, and under sort of the Western standard, traditional academia as we have it now. That is how it is. These days, we often have, in addition to that, we have people who are both like that and also are very, very business-minded, right? And so what has been happening to pretty much most big universities and many of the smaller ones as well in this country is the universities have become more and more business-like in how they're run. And this is, of course, a major issue if you care about academic integrity and also the quality of the education, and you care about things that aren't generally thought of as useful to like economically useful, the liberal arts and whatnot, unless of course you can teach kids to design logos for big companies. That's fine. But like art history classes, oh, we don't need those. That won't make anyone any money. It certainly won't make the university very much money. What are we going to do with that? And so they fund the arts less and less and less unless they can manage to make some money off of it, or produce students who can make money off of whatever you're teaching them in a very corporate environment. Anyway, so the Communist Party branches in the departments, when told by the central headquarters to consider somebody for membership, took this as an order. So they did their best to win these prospects to the party. Most people, when asked if they wanted to join, said, of course, why not? So the individual agreed, but what if his history? Our position was that all intellectuals had a complicated political history, so we needn't look into it too deeply. I feel like that would be a good reason to look into it. People in academia are often this sort of elitist type, intellectual elitist, if you want to put it that way. People who see themselves as better than everyone else in some way, you know, and often are set in bourgeois ways of thinking. And in this case, the problem was Western styles of education, teaching styles, that they were very set in their ideals, and not digging into that, not questioning that, and not confronting that in any way, and just like, yeah, sure, join the Communist Party. Well, I think you all know what's going to happen here, don't you?
No.
This was Jiang Nanxiang's position. We just judged by whether they behaved well, and by that we meant whether they supported our revisionist line. Well, if they agree with us, then they must be a good candidate. They never stepped aside and say, so what are we correct? Essentialism and superiority. Of course, the Communist Party is a party led by Mao Zedong. We had to go through the steps laid out in the party constitution, but we did it quite formally and used as standards our revisionist standards, our loyalist standards. When recruiting workers and peasants, we had used different standards. Why adopt something new for intellectuals? Because we thought we had no expertise. How could we lead a modern university? We must make our party a party of professors. Without professors, we can't lead. I think we should ban professors from the party. No, it's a bit harsh. But I asked, wasn't support for the party how well any given peasant supported the Communist Party leadership? In fact, the same standard that you used for recruiting in the villages? Yes, answered Liu Bing, but in the villages there was open class struggle going on. You could judge by how a peasant behaved in this struggle and pick out the activists. Yeah, in the villages, you know, especially early on during the New Democratic Revolution, there were major mass movements against the feudal lords, you know, often referred to as landlords, which I think, while it is technically a correct translation, it doesn't really get across to Western audiences often. To Western English speakers generally don't understand that we're talking about feudal lords, not just landlords like they exist in Western countries under capitalism. We're talking about a feudal system that existed in China for well over 1,000 years, thousands of years really, right? This is not the same thing necessarily as capitalist landlords, which, while they are a carryover from feudalism, don't exactly operate the same way similarly, but they're not the same. And when people just translate landlords as landlords, you know, here, instead of pointing out that they were feudal lords, which is what they, you know, they're, you know, if you translate it as feudal lords instead of landlords, people might understand a little bit better what you're talking about. It's just my own thoughts, but landlords is the usual translation. So, because it's correct, but you know, people often don't understand the context and don't understand what that means. So when we talk about how Mao struggled into this movement and all the peasants were struggling against the landlords, people are thinking of their landlord who owns their apartment building or something, and not a literal feudal lord. So anyway. So, but as you explained it today, there was class struggle here on the campus then. Couldn't you judge it by the same way here? I didn't really study Mao Zedong. I thought I understood the struggle, but I didn't really. I failed to use the viewpoint of class struggle to look at what was going on, replied Liu Bing. He continues, major issue, failing to use the viewpoint of class struggle to look at what was going on. A lot of people fail to do that. And of course, class, depending on how you define class, some people are have a very economistic definition of class. But of course, really, it just means a group. course, they're focusing on the proletariat and bourgeoisie, which are mainly economic groups regarding the ways of the organization and the means of production and their ownership, but you can have other aspects of class. Gender is a class. Race is a class. They're just categorizations of groups of people that often struggle against each other due to one oppressing the other. Anyway. But yes, most people tend to use the word class these days to refer only to an economic thing, really, which is a problem. Because then they end up being very reductive in their arguments. But anyway, but the actual problem is not caring about things from a class viewpoint. It's reducing that idea of class down to purely economic standpoints. Not purely economic meanings, I guess. I'm sorry. Anyway, my brain isn't working very well. Anyway, so he continued. Once the professors joined the party, we brought them quickly into the branches, department, and university level party committees. But once they got in, they spread their own thinking about education throughout the party. Hence, the professors' ideas became the decisions of the Communist Party, the policy of the Communist Party. This gradually changed the nature of the Communist Party as a proletarian vanguard. But I never saw this as a two-line struggle. Do you mean to say that the intellectuals should not be recruited into the party? I asked. Of course not, said Liu Bing, somewhat startled. I was not wrong to recruit intellectuals. But the question was, were they up to the standards of proletarian vanguard fighters? We need intellectuals, they're an important force. The problem was that many of the professors had problems in their ideology and in their history, and we took them in anyway. For instance, we accepted a professor who had been a district leader of the Kuomintang. Now we have expelled people like that. We also accepted good people, patriotic people, who wanted socialism, but were really not vanguard material. In the course of the Cultural Revolution, these people have developed, and they are still in the Communist Party. Then there are those who really were reactionary bourgeois academic authorities in their respective fields, even though politically they were not reactionary. People such as Liang Xicheng, a civil engineer and architect. Now they have learned many new lessons and really want to change. In the Cultural Revolution, Liang's reactionary academic theories were repudiated, but we wanted very much to save and develop this person. He had not been involved in reactionary politics. After repudiation by the masses, he criticized himself, and even though he was sick, he studied Mao Zedong thought intentionally. He wanted to remain in the Communist Party. This man has been patriotic, he has supported the party in socialism, so he remains with us. He is over 70 years old and sick now. I went to see him to discuss the matter of this party membership. When he spoke of it and of Mao Zedong, he was moved to tears. We have to take all these aspects into account and unite with him. Since Liu Bing had been at Resistance University in Yan'an under Lin Biao, I wondered how he had so easily abandoned the concepts of mutual aid and mutual study that were so vital to revolutionary education there. Yeah. Mutual aid and mutual study, weren't we just talking about this? Huh. Well, he replied thoughtfully, repeating much that he had said before. The first day I came here, they all told me Resistance University was no good. Here we had regular education. I was a clod, a country bumpkin. What I thought was, these people are experts, I'd better listen to what they have to say. Not only was I enmeshed in their system, but all my direct superiors, from Lu Dingyi on down, were supporting the regular idea. And of course, by regular, they really just mean, Western-influenced. A standard Western-style university is what they wanted, right? And that's what Tsinghua University was founded to be in the first place. It was founded by Americans. Anyway, if you had left me on my own, I would have modeled the education here along Yan'an lines, because that's the education I knew. But what I studied at the higher party school was a complete duplication of Russian experience, which came from people who were on the Central Committee. As for me, I couldn't tell one line from another. But didn't you come in from the countryside to overthrow the old system? Yes, of course, said Liu. I came to overthrow the old system, but I was gradually absorbed into it. The most difficult thing is that the revisionists wave a red flag and pose as revolutionaries. The leaders never said this was a bourgeois school. They said that this was a great socialist university, but actually it had the same old content, and I fell for it. Jiang Nanxiang said, "If you don't have some professional competence, how can you stand on your feet around here?" He wanted me and Hu Jian to become professors in the political science department. I had only been through 2 years of middle school, and Hu Jian had only been through primary school. How could we become professors? But if the title of professor was too grand for us, we still felt that we needed some professional status, some acquired skill, so we decided to study Russian. At this time, we were learning everything from the Russians, so Hu Jian and I decided we would amass some capital, some academic standing, and if we mastered the Russian language. It was not wrong to study a foreign language. The more you know, the better, but our thinking was, old cadres who can speak a foreign language, we won't be looked down on them. We won't be looked down on then. Okay, yeah. Hu Jian studied a year and quit. I studied for a week and quit. We weren't using proletarian thinking. We didn't use our experience at Yunnan to transform Tsinghua. Instead, we got transformed by this old bourgeois university. When I came here, said Liu Bing, summing up, I followed others in political line, educational line, party construction, and professional viewpoint. Thus I made serious line mistakes, but I didn't realize it. I wasn't one bit aware of it. I made serious mistakes, but I thought only that I had worked hard for the Communist Party and the revolution. Just as surely as Professor Tong Shibai had been a bourgeois reactionary authority, so the cadre Liu Bing had been a capitalist roader, a party person in authority taking the capitalist road. Nevertheless, before June 20th, 1966, such an idea had never entered his head. On that day, he returned to the Tsinghua campus for the first time in several months. He had been away leading the work teams of a whole county as they carried through the socialist education movement in the countryside. On his way back, he had stopped over in Beijing to attend a week-long meeting of higher cadres involved in rural work. Quick note about the socialist education movement. It was launched throughout China's countryside in the early 1960s in order to consolidate and develop collective agriculture after a period of retreat toward individualism led by Liu Shaoqi. So this was the sort of the Maoist versus the more capitalist road Liu Shaoqi type. This was this constant struggle back and forth between Liu Shaoqi's people and Mao's people. Mao's people always wanted these mass movements and collective education and collective improvement of agricultural infrastructure and industry, blah 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 blah, and Liu Shaoqi was very heavy on emphasizing individualism and more traditionally, bourgeois capitalist ideals, which of course, but he was in the Communist Party, so he couldn't possibly be anyway. So, I thought I was on the left. Hadn't I led 4,000 students in the transformation of a whole county? Back home on the campus, the students had started putting dunce caps on the heads of administrators, but here I was at the Beijing hotel studying. Of course, we had heard about the goings-on of the goings-on at the campuses, but I had no details about Tsinghua. And anyway, I thought, I am on the left. No one will struggle against me. Liu Bing was in for a traumatic shock when his chauffeured car drove into Tsinghua's West Gate on the bright morning of June 20th. It was stopped by a crowd of angry students. They pulled him rudely from his comfortable seat, set a tall conical dunce cap on his head, and dragged him before a mass meeting so that he could be repudiated. But I am getting ahead of my story. Good for them, by the way. Good for the students. The educational system, perpetuated by bourgeois academic authorities like Tong Shibai and Qian Weicheng, and reinforced by such capitalist roaders as Liu Bing and Jiang Nanxiang, was particularly hard on students of worker and peasant origin who had no opportunity to go to the more prestigious middle schools in China's coastal cities. Worker and peasant students were very much in the position of black and third world students from the rural south and the ghettos of America, who find themselves ill-prepared to compete academically with the sons and daughters of suburban professionals and business elite when, if they ever reach the college of their choice. When and if. Poor peasant students at Tsinghua told us about a class in the agricultural engineering department that entered the university in 1960. They were all of the worker or poor peasant background, and they resented the treatment they got, the unwillingness of professors to explain their blackboard formulas, the reluctance of advanced students to help the less advanced, the sudden death examinations that eliminated wholesale all those who were poorly prepared. The party secretary of this class was an experienced older cadre. He led his classmates in criticizing the whole system and pointed out that it added up to a wrong line in higher education. This upset the school authorities. Their first act was to remove this man as party secretary, but the class stuck together and continued to fight, so in the name of catering to its academic difficulties, the whole group was prematurely graduated. Not a different word that ends in ated. That can be premature. This removed them from Jiang Nanxiang's hair, so to speak. It was said that they gave the university a stomachache. Take a laxative and purge the stomach. Instead of being allowed to complete their course, which was to end in 1964, they were suddenly sent out to work in 1963. Another blatant case involved a woman tractor driver from the Northeast who was a model worker and also famous as a parachutist. When she came to Tsinghua, she had been in good health and was politically advanced. But the professors looked down on her as a girl with a big stomach but a small brain. They called her dumb to her face and constantly undermined her morale. Her health deteriorated week by week, and finally, after 2 years, she had to have part of one lung cut out because of tuberculosis. The regulation was that certain exams had to be taken, but when the time came, this sick woman was still in the hospital. Instead of making special arrangements for her, the authorities said if she didn't take the exams, she would be expelled from the university. Her classmates went to the hospital at night to help her study, and she came to the exam straight from her sickbed. Halfway through the ordeal, she fainted. Of course, she didn't pass, and she had to leave school. Because she had not fulfilled the task given her by the party, she applied many times to return, but the authorities repeatedly rejected her on the grounds that they had to maintain the high academic standards of their institution. They told her she just did not qualify. The prestige of Tsinghua was at stake. She begged to be allowed to sit in on courses without credit, but this they would not allow either, so she was driven from the campus altogether. Relatable. In sharp contrast to the short shrift, is that a word? That's meant to say shift, or is it a real word that I've never heard before? We're learning shrift, the act of shriving. What does that mean? Confession to a priest, or absolution given by a priest. What? Remission of sins pronounced by a priest. Okay. In sharp contrast to the short shrift shown to this, stop with the shs all in a row, to this labor model were the great lengths to which this is like she sells seashells on the seashore. I can't do this right now. Amazing. Okay. Fine. Unique New York. Let's take it down. Boy. Anyway, in sharp contrast to the short shrift shown to this labor model were the great lengths to which the university administration went to welcome a rather brilliant student from Shanghai who was steeped in bourgeois ideology. I might have failed the shibboleth. I don't know, y'all. My voice fucks up sometimes. Or are they gonna... Fuck, they're gonna throw me in the river. Or they stab you with a spear and then throw you in the river. Which one is it? Hold on. I can't remember which. Hold on. Which... Do they stab them and then throw them in the river? I think they throw them in the river regardless, but which... let's see here. The fucking Jephthah. Of course it's a Jephthah involved in this. Oh my god. Fucking Jephthah. Wait. Okay. How many people actually know this story? Do they actually know this? Do people know what the actual... I feel like people might know what a shibboleth is, but they don't understand. They've never read the Bible, so they don't know the origin. A lot of people don't know. At least in this country, you know, since the country is majority Christian, most Christians don't actually read the Bible, so... At least not extensively enough to know this story, usually. Even though it's a rather famous one, they still don't know it. Anyway, so people don't know the origin story. I'll explain it to you. I'll read it from Wikipedia here for you to know. So basically, so there was the Ephraimites, okay, and the Gileadites, two groups, okay, and they were fighting. You had the Gileadites under the command of Jephthah, of all fucking people, who I'll talk about, and I'll explain why that's funny in a second. Trying to kick all the Ephraimites out across the River Jordan. Go away. So anyway, they asked, they pronounced the word shibboleth differently. So the Gileadites pronounced it shibboleth, and the Ephraimites pronounced it sibboleth. Okay, they didn't have the sh sound, so that's why I would fail. That was my joke about how I would fail the shibboleth. I'd be thrown in the river. So anyway, let's see here. What did they do? It just says that he slew them, or they slew them. The people who couldn't say shibboleth. If they said sibboleth, they slew them. I guess I was wrong about them throwing them in the river, but it would make sense. I mean, they were guarding the river, so I think stabbing them and throwing them in the river would have been good. Good thing to do to a person in general. Wait. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, so yeah, with my failure there to pronounce the she sells seashells on the seashore. See, I fucked it up again. I might be failing the shibboleth. Maybe. At least I say shibboleth, right? We need new shibboleths. Should we make spelling bourgeoisie correctly a shibboleth? If you can't spell it correctly, you can't join my communist book club. And we'll kick you out. We'll stab you and throw you in the river if you don't. Oh boy. Anyway, so in sharp contrast to the short shrift shown to this labor model were the great lengths to which the university administration went to welcome a rather brilliant student from Shanghai who was steeped in bourgeois ideology. The admissions personnel knew all about this youth's politics and family background, and some wanted to turn him down. Others argued that since he had an above 90 average score, or average, he must be seriously considered. Finally, the party committee itself took up the question, and Vice Secretary Hu Jian made a special trip to Shanghai to interview the prospect. He came back, insisting that the young man must enter Tsinghua because he was so brilliant. When this fellow finally came to campus, he was so angered he so angered the other students with his reactionary ideas that they wanted to repudiate him publicly. They called him Little Tito, but the party committee protected him. Their slogan was, "Before grades, all are equal," said my student informants. Their idea of a politically reliable person was a person with an average of 80 or above. Let's see, I had above a 3.5 GPA. What would that mean? That would definitely be above an 80 average, right? Yeah, I got a lot of A's. I don't have my transcript lying. Actually, I probably do. Maybe. I don't know. I probably have it somewhere, but I don't know where. Anyway. And I'm not going to pull it up, because, I mean, it has my dead name all over it. Someday I'll find it. But yeah, all I know was that it was good enough for whatever cum laude is at that university, weighted or unweighted. I don't know how it worked. I just know that I had a pretty decent, deep GPA. Yeah. It was definitely would have translated to above 80. Hold on, what is... Hold on. Let me just see the standard. Oh my god, that's not what I'm looking for. There's also, I don't know if they used the pluses with like, I don't know what the exact system was at the time at that school, so I don't know, because it differs by school. So, but anyway, I know that it was decent, or rather, not just decent, but good. Apparently, somehow. I don't know how I did that. I have no idea how I managed that, honestly. No clue. Anyway. The worst scores I ever got was a D in a couple of classes first semester. The ones I had to retake, Calculus 3 and the first circuits class, introductory circuits class, which a lot of people had to retake after that semester. A lot. Like, half of us had to retake it. It was bad. The professor was not happy, and the school was not happy with the professor, and the professor was not happy with us. But it's okay. That guy later became my favorite professor, so... He had high standards, but he was correct to have those high standards. And he wasn't, he did grow as a person over my time there, I think. Anyway. that professor, his exams were open book, and he gave you the questions beforehand, like up to a week in advance sometimes, or at least like a couple days before, or like what class before. So you had a few days to figure out the questions. The exams would have different numbers sometimes in each question, you know? So like it would be the same problem, but it would have different numbers. So you can't just like work out the answers all in advance and just write down the numbers. You also had to like write out all your work, obviously, and you had to use the new numbers on the exams when you're doing all the math and whatever. But like, yeah, when you have an exam like that, that's literally like open book. You can bring all your notes, do whatever you want. He literally gives you the questions in advance. That's a really, really hard exam. Very, very difficult. Yeah. Because a lot of people still failed. Since you've seen the pattern, it's fine. Well, you have to figure it out, though. You have to learn how to solve that problem. And that was the hard part. And so, like, you had sometimes several days, even up to a week, to figure out all the answers or the ways to solve the problems on the exam, and write those all down and get all the work, written out, so you can just do that on the exam. And people still failed because they were extraordinarily difficult. But that's fine. Open book tests, y'all, with questions in advance. That's not making it easier. It's making it hard. It means it's harder. Boy, I usually did quite well, actually. But there was one time, what would happen is that people would study in groups. They would get the questions in advance, and they would go over them and try to figure out the answers. They would work together to figure out the answers ahead of the exam so that everybody would know. Sometimes a certain group of people would look over a question, and they would come up with the wrong answer collectively and decide that that was correct, and then all of those people would do the same wrong thing on the exam. This happened to me once. It happened to other people more than once. And so he was able to immediately see which people were studying together because they all had the same wrong answer. called us out on it once too. It's like, you need to come up with the right answer if you're going to study together. Isn't that the point? Just making fun of us. Oh my god. Anyway. Let's see here. Alright. Alright, let's see here. So anyway, they cared a lot about the grades at this school. Math proofs exams were open book usually. Oh god. I hate math proofs. Fuck that shit. Okay. Anyway. It was all very clear at home, said Wu Wei-yu, a former Hubei peasant, and the first in his family ever to receive a higher education. Like Joe Biden, even though that's not true. He said it in a speech once, though. He stole that speech from someone else and just kept it the same and changed his name. Changed the names, in the speech. He plagiarized, like, an entire fucking speech. That wasn't about him. It was about the personal experiences of the guy who wrote the speech, and he said that it was about him instead of the original guy who wrote the speech. And he said that he was the first person to ever get a college education in his family, which was a complete lie. He just wasn't. And he didn't come up with, he wasn't raised in a poor family. He was raised in a very well-off family. Anyway. Yeah, that was a Joe move. That was back in the day. It was like in the 80s or something. It was really early on too. Classic Joe Biden. Yeah. Anyway. Let's see here. So, at home, after land reform, the poor peasants and hired laborers had prestige, and the landlords had none. But here at the university, the professors were still riding high all over the stage, while we poor peasants were suppressed. Wu had never left his home in Huangbei County until he came to Tsinghua in 1965. He still looked more like a peasant than a college graduate. Unshaven stubble on his heart-shaped face made his dark complexion seem even darker. Long hair hung down over a pair of very bright eyes that set off a nose rather western in its prominence. What does that mean? His manner was energetic, combative, well-suited to his stocky, labor-tempered body. They really like describing people's physical appearances in this book. Bill here likes to do that, our author. Tsinghua, he went on, was really an independent kingdom made up of graduates of Tsinghua, and even the higher cadres from outside had it tough. An outsider sees problems very soon and begins to raise questions, but then he gets isolated, and that's the end of that. It's kind of like how cops work. Part 2. It is right to rebel. Correct, I say as an anarchist, but that's also what Mao said. Boy, okay.